Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our session for In the Know, Tips and Tricks for Evolve 365. We want to start this weekly series to give simple and easy tips anyone can go back to their desk and quickly implement. We know your time is valuable, so we're always going to keep sessions no more than 30 minutes, sometimes even less. We're pushing the topics out monthly, so you only have to sign up once for the monthly series instead of 4 or 5 times. And if you ever miss a session, you can always catch it on our Planet Technologies YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/Planet Technologies. We're working on the topics for July now, and you should see those launch next week. So a little about me. I'm your host, Tanya Kaiser. I'm a longtime Microsoft geek and SharePoint nerd. One of the things I get really excited about is helping people learn new skills, especially when it comes to the Microsoft Productivity Suite. If you ever have any questions after the sessions, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. So a little about Planet. Planet has been providing expert support in the Microsoft world for over 18 years. We offer full services for the entire Microsoft Cloud and Productivity Suite, including advisory, deployment and training services, mobile application development and solutions, and strategic business consulting, including technology, compliance, and security guidance. So we're going to go ahead and kick things off. Today we're going to look at built-in ways to move content around in SharePoint. There's only 3 different ways that you can move content natively within SharePoint, and those include Open with Explorer, which is available in Internet Explorer only, syncing a library, and then content and structure, which sometimes is limited to publishing sites. I'm going to walk through each of these and show you what the process is, and then at the end we'll also talk about some other tools that you may be looking at to expand those options. So we're going to jump right into it. So Open with Explorer. This is the option that most end users will have access to since it's on the library ribbon in most SharePoint sites. This only works with Internet Explorer, so if you're trying to use any other browser, including Microsoft's new Edge browser, you will not have that option. Users do have to be pretty careful and pay attention what folder they're moving items to. And then I've noticed that it does not work well for large document moves. So if you just have to do a little bit of reorganization within SharePoint, this is a fine option. It's out of the box. It's available with the exception to Mac users who do not have Internet Explorer. But if you have large-scale migrations that you need to move content around, it's going to be a pretty painful process. Well, we're going to go ahead and switch right into a SharePoint site and take a look at it. Now I'll show you really quickly on Microsoft Edge browser just what I was talking about, that it's only available with Internet Explorer. So I'm just going to come in and open a site. And I've been working off of this team site for the last few weeks in our demos, but I'm going to go into one of my libraries. And on the library ribbon, you can see in the middle here on Connect and Export, I've got an Open with Explorer option, but it's actually dimmed. And it says it's disabled, but the truth is that it's only available with the Internet Explorer browser. So I'm going to switch over to Internet Explorer, and I'm in that same SharePoint site. We'll just refresh the page. And you'll notice that I've got the new library experience. So with this new library experience, you actually do not have access to the ribbon right away. So you can see that there's some new menu items here for adding in a brand new document, including link, which was one of the updates, uploading a new document, syncing the library, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit, doing a quick edit, which would quickly let you edit the columns there. On our ellipsis menu, all we've got in is alert. So under all documents, this is mainly changing the view. You can create a tile view, a list view. You can see there's view in File Explorer. So again, if you've got the new library experience and looking for the ribbon, it's a little disconcerting to miss that item. Now you can always go up to the gear and go to library settings to get the settings menu, but things are a little different with the new library experience. Now you do have the option in the lower left-hand corner to return to classic SharePoint and see that ribbon. But in our case, we've got what we want. We want to view in File Explorer. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And it's going to give me an error message right away telling me that they're having issues syncing it. So let me go ahead and return to classic SharePoint mode. And let's try that again. You can see my button here is no longer dimmed. I'm going to go ahead and select Allow. And you can see that opened pretty quickly, so there may still be some issues with the new library experience. But you can see now I've got my library open in a Windows Explorer ribbon, which is great. You can see in my address bar, it's actually pulling in the user, and it's linking it to my OneDrive site. So if we wanted to move this to a different library, I'm going to take my folder library, which has folders set up, and I'm going to return to classic SharePoint. And just repeat that step, because we would have to do this for every library that we want to move content into or out of. So I'm going to click Open with Explorer again, click Allow, and you can see now it gives me a slightly different address. It's pulling in that SharePoint site. We can see that we've got a SharePoint address, sites. The library type is actually called Content Type Hub, and then we've got folder library, which is my name. And if I open these two, I can see that I've got my nested folders like we were working on a couple of weeks ago when we were looking at SharePoint. So this is one way to move content, and essentially what I would have to do is open these libraries within each item and make sure that I have two windows open and I can move content back and forth. So you can see that would be a little bit clunky for users because they're not moving things from one side to another. So you'd have to be really, really careful about how they're moving content around. So in this case, I'm going to go back up one. And if I look in Final Documents, you can see I have the same PDFs here. But so we can see this change, I'm actually going to go into Working Documents and move these PDFs from my column library to my folder library in subfolder 2. So this is very similar to working on your computer, moving files around with Windows Explorer, but you're opening up a SharePoint site in that Windows Explorer view so you can move content. Now again, my experience doesn't work great if you're moving a lot of documents around, and the one thing that I see repeatedly is users have to be very, very mindful of where they're moving content from and to. So they can get a little bit confusing working with multiple windows. Now if we go back to our SharePoint site, and I'm going to go into our column library, we have these PDFs, so I should be able to refresh and see that those PDFs are no longer in this library. Where it looks like we're still seeing some of them. So let's go over to the folder library, and we know we put those in subfolder 2. And I remember that I created a view on this that hid all of the folders, so let me go back and modify my view so we can see the folders. We're going to go ahead and choose to show our folders in this view really quickly. And you can see there are those PDFs. Now here's the big caveat with using the built-in tools within SharePoint. So these happen to be PDFs and I moved them. You can see that they were moved about a minute ago. So if you happen to be moving documents for archive purposes, maybe you have a separate library for archiving, this is something that you really need to be aware of. There's no way within SharePoint out of the box to move files and maintain date and timestamps in author, editor, or history. So if this had been a different author other than Katie Jordan, it would have a new modified date and a new author. So again, if you need to move content, you do have some built-in ways, but be very aware that it is going to show as a modification to that document. So if these have been Word documents and we have versioning turned on both libraries, it's going to mark that as a new version, even though it's a simple move. So that's how we take a look at moving files around with Open with Explorer option. Again, only works with Internet Explorer. Have to be really careful where items are being moved to and from. Doesn't really work well for large moves, and then you always have that caution there that you're going to be modifying information when you move it. So the next item is sync in a library, and you saw this really briefly. This is the other option that's usually available for end users because they have access to the ribbon and they will have access to their own computer where they can sync something to. This is essentially using that OneDrive component to sync a library. Now, very much like the Open with Explorer option, you would have to go through each library and sync them individually to have the libraries available that you can then move content to. So once you have those libraries synced, you can move content. Again, if you're just moving a few files around, not a big deal. If you've got an extensive SharePoint environment with a ton of different document libraries and a ton of different sites that you're going between, that can get pretty cumbersome and difficult to manage pretty quickly. So we'll show you that same task. Now I've already synced one site, so I'm going to go to my Edge browser and I'm just going to go back to SharePoint and pick some sites that I normally don't work with so we can see how that works with a brand new site. So we'll come into our sales and marketing site. You can see this is one of my demo sites. It's got a lot of content in here. And I'm just going to come in and pick a document library that I know there's content in. Now again, we've got a different slightly view, but you can see I've got a sync button here. So I'm just going to click sync. And you'll see pop-ups on my demo since this is a tenant that's going to expire soon. And you can see there's not a whole lot. It's just saying sync now. And in this case, you want to allow the browser to open OneDrive. You can see it's wanting to save my library here. Now, one thing that's interesting to know is that on Internet Explorer, you do have the option to modify where the library saves. It doesn't look like that's an option on the Edge browser. So I'm going to go ahead and click Sync, and those files should start syncing. Now, while that's happening, it's going to give you a pop-up, and you should normally see this pretty quickly, saying Show My Files, and you can see right away it pulled in the SharePoint site, marketing documents, and I've now got these synced. So I can come in and I could open documents directly from here and edit them, but really what I want to do is move this content around. So I'm going to go back to my second browser, and we'll just pick a different SharePoint site. Again, one that I haven't synced before. We'll take Research and Development. And we'll go ahead and look in the Digital Assets folder and see what kind of content we have. Let's just try documents so we don't have too many large media files. So this is, again, another document library. And if we wanted to move this within the built-in tools, we could open with Explorer. But in this case, we'll go ahead and choose the Sync option. Again, we're going to click Sync Now. We're going to click Allow. And it'll pop up and say, hey, this is where we're going to sync content. And we'll go ahead and click Sync Now. So you would have to go through each library that you're working with to sync these items. So again, not a big deal if you just have two libraries that you're moving between, but if you've got a large SharePoint environment and a lot of different files, that can get really, really cumbersome fairly quickly. So you can see each time it's opening up a window, and you can see, again, I've got the SharePoint site, Research and Development, and then here's my documents. Now you'll notice that I've got my Contoso OneDrive account synced here, and underneath it created a folder under SharePoint, and I've got the Marketing Documents one, Research and Development, and then the Team Site one that I had previously synced. You'll also notice that it added SharePoint as well, so it's actually in two different locations. It did put it under OneDrive, but in my case it also put in that nice little SharePoint link. So again, in this case I would just open up two different windows, drag and drop between, and this is another option for end users. So if we wanted to move documents between Research and Development and Marketing, I can come in here now and use the Windows Explorer function and just type in some folders and move content around. Maybe we'll take all the PowerPoints and move those into Marketing Documents. So again, we can come in and just use our regular commands, cut and paste. You can always open two windows and drag and drop between, and it's that simple using that sync option. So if we go back to our Marketing Documents team site, we should now have the option to see that new folder that we just created and our migrated content. So I'll go back to Sales and Marketing. And that was just in Marketing Documents. And we've got our migrated content. And again, you want to note that it did show those changes as a move. So you can see this content March 25th, but when I created that new folder, it's showing it. So these are just things that you really, really want to be aware of when you're moving content around. Now, of course, I removed that content from the Research and Development site. So if somebody came in and was looking for those documents, or maybe they had a link to that, that's going to be a change that they weren't expecting. So when you're migrating content, whichever mode you're using, you want to make sure that you're communicating to your users, especially if you're removing stuff that they accessed recently, where the new content is. And the other thing to be aware of, if I go back into my SharePoint site, where I move those new items, hopefully we won't get another pop-up asking me to purchase Office 365. It's just the notification on my demo tenant that it's going to be expiring soon. So the other thing to be aware of is I moved this content. So if anybody had a URL to these documents, that has now changed. So again, they were in, you can see department is part of my URL there. Oops, I didn't want to open it up, but that's okay. Let me just go back to that Sales and Marketing site. So this, I've now essentially modified the URL in addition to moving that. So communicating this process, if it's somebody who's just coming through and archiving, that's fine, but you want to let your users know, especially if it's an active site like these two demo sites are, that, hey, we're going to be moving content around, it's going to have a completely different URL, so you want to make sure that they're aware of that change. And you can see if we go back through this URL, again, it's in that folder. So if they had the URL for the research and development site, we just broke their URL. Hopefully that's not referenced somewhere else. So syncing is just another option, very similar to Open with Explorer because that's where you're going to be moving content, but it does allow you to do that from multiple browsers. So that's another option that end users have. And if they're working with a library repeatedly, this may be something that they want to do anyway, so they can pull those files down just a little bit easier. So again, we just covered how to sync a library. Again, similar function as Open with Explorer, except you can do it in more than one browser. You saw me use it on the Edge browser versus only working in Internet Explorer. It also works with Firefox, Chrome, and Safari for Mac users. That's a little tricky situation because Mac users don't have Open with Explorer, but if they have a OneDrive client that they're somehow able to get working, then that's an option for them as well. The same cautions as working with Open with Explorer. If you've got a large number of documents or a lot of libraries that you're working with, it's cumbersome to go through each one, sync them, and then move content. So the other option is something that would be restricted to site owners or admins, hopefully, and this is accessed under site settings, and that's actually content and structure. So this is one other area within SharePoint that you can reorganize content. I'm going to switch to that really quickly. I'm actually just going to go into my Internet Explorer browser, and we can go back to SharePoint and look at our team site. Now again, this would be something that's hopefully restricted to a site owner or a site admin. Your average end user should not have access to site settings and be able to come in and modify stuff. Now normally we would see this under site administration, but this is a team site. So this is sometimes restricted to publishing sites, but I want to show you how it's available in other sites. Now this is something that your Office 365 administrator can come in and activate that. Or if you wanted to make sure it was available on a team site, you can come in and make sure that your publishing features are active. So you can see SharePoint Server Publishing is not active. I would come in, activate that, and then have access to content and structure. But in our case, I'm just going to go through one of the other sites that I know has it built in. So we'll go back to our marketing site. And we'll just wait for that site to open. And again, I'm going to go over to Site Settings. You can now see under Site Administration, I have a slightly different menu since this is a publishing site, and I've got Content and Structure. So I'm going to click into that. And you can see this looks, if you've ever used SharePoint in the past, this is very similar to what you would see with SharePoint 2007 or SharePoint 2010. You've got this, these containers and organizers. Now again, this is something that's built into SharePoint. In this case, we're working within the browser, and we have to be very, very careful about how we're moving content. So we know that we had sales and marketing documents, and I came in, and if I expand this one, and I go back into Documents, I created this folder for migrated content. So I can come in and looking at this folder, I can select all these documents, and then you can see I've got a menu, Navigate Up, New, I can create a new folder, a new item, Actions, I can copy or move, and I can also delete these documents, and then Settings, show link to this location. So there's a few options here. Now obviously I'm going to be using the Actions menu, and let's select Move. Now it's going to pop up, and I can come back to Research and Development, go to their documents, and select that folder and select OK. Now you can see that in my tabs it's actually waiting. So again, this is one other built-in area that you can move content within SharePoint. You may not see that content and structure menu specifically with team sites, but for the most part on Office 365 and SharePoint Online, you will see that. Again, this gives you very limited options in what you can and can't do, and this option should definitely be restricted to site owners or admins. You don't want an average user coming into site settings menu and messing around too much. Very similar to the Open with Explorer option or syncing multiple libraries. This is a little bit cumbersome if you have a lot of documents to move around. So you can see it's taking a little bit longer. It's performing this move operation in the background. So in some ways, the Sync and Open with Explorer option is actually faster. But if I come back up here, I'm just going to collapse Research and Development. Let's expand Sales and Marketing Documents. And one more time into Documents and that migrated content folder. You can see it's now empty. So if I go back to my Sales and Marketing site one more time, now I've got that empty folder, and I can also come in into Content and Structure and remove that folder. But for right now, I want us to be able to see that folder. And I apologize, I'm going to keep getting that pop-up on my demo tenant. So again, that new folder that I created today when I migrated content from the Research and Development site to Marketing is now empty. And if we go back to our Research and Development site, which might be open in one of these, or let's switch over to Edge and see if we still have that open. Looks like no. That's okay, we'll go ahead and open it again. We can go back into the Research and Development folder and see that those PowerPoints are back in the Documents folder. So 3 built-in options within SharePoint to move content around is what we're showing. I'm going to come in and you can see that these documents were moved back into the folder. So let's just do a quick refresh on that. And you can see I have my PowerPoints back. Now it's interesting to note that if we open this with Explorer and dragged and dropped items, that date would change. Using Content and Structure, the date didn't change. That's normally a mixed bag. I've had the date change sometimes when I'm using Content and Structure, so it's still something that I would caution people to be aware of. But again, these are the built-in tools within SharePoint. We just looked at Content and Structure. Really want that to be limited to site owners or admins, people who have a little bit higher level of training and permissions on a site. Hopefully your end users aren't coming in and messing with site content and structure, because it can give them access to other parts of the site that they may not be aware of or shouldn't have access to. Now, the other item that I want to discuss is third-party tools. So you've seen the built-in options. For moving a few files around, you don't have to download a file, delete it on the SharePoint site, re-upload it. It's perfectly fine to use Open with Explorer, syncing a library, or Content and Structure if you have access to it. But if you need to maintain strict document history, the date and timestamps, author editor information, version history, or you need to move a really large amount of content, the built-in tools are going to fall far short. So you would spend all day syncing libraries and then moving content in small batches. It may be a mixed bag. I've certainly ran into issues, especially with the Open with Explorer option. So some of the third parties out there that do have tools specifically for migrating content, because we would consider it a content migration, are ShareGate, Metalogix, and AvePoint. There are also other companies out there, but those are the 3 larger ones. Of the 3, I would recommend ShareGate. I'm looking at maybe doing a demo on ShareGate tools in our July sessions, because I think it's a really, really powerful tool. So ShareGate is the one that I would recommend because they don't charge you based on the amount of data that you're migrating. It's unlimited migration. So once you have a tool, you're free to use it however much you want. And they have a very clean and easy to use interface. They also have a very fine level of control for date and timestamps, author editor information. So one thing that I commonly come across in SharePoint environments that have been in use for quite a while is people want to start archiving content, but if they're moving it to an archive site or even to a different library and they have to maintain that author editor information, they run into an issue when the original author editor are no longer with the company. They're no longer in Active Directory. ShareGate does have a function where it will let you maintain that information, and that's really important sometimes for compliance reasons and record keeping. So they have a lot of options in there. Metalogix and AvePoint have similar functions as well, but ShareGate seems to be the cleanest interface and the easiest to use, and their support documentation is really, really very clear And they also have great customer service as well. You can call and get a person on the phone or email them, and they're very responsive. The other reason I recommend ShareGate is, in addition to the migration piece of that, they have a great management tool that partners with their migration piece, and that management tool can be really powerful. So if you are looking at investing in a third-party tool for document migration, archiving purposes, Metalogix and AvePoint definitely have tools that are worth looking at, but I would say ShareGate gives you that package that can get you up and running within minutes without a big learning curve, and you can also pass that license on to somebody else. You just deactivate it on a machine and then reactivate it. Their management tool for ShareGate is pretty nifty. You can pull reports on document libraries and sites, drill down to when a file was last modified, how many versions. So when you're really looking at managing the content on your site or managing SharePoint as a whole, they'd be the one that I recommend. Now again, there's others besides the three out there, but these are the three large ones, and of them, I have the most experience with ShareGate and using their customer support. I would absolutely recommend them. And if you check back on our July topics, we may be doing a session on those. So one of the things that you saw in my demos was the SharePoint Roadmap. So the new modern libraries are rolling out. They were pushed out several weeks ago after the May 4th Future of SharePoint announcement to first release candidates, but they're starting to roll out now to other tenants. You saw that there's no ribbon. So that Open with Explore option is not readily available. Now you did see that it is available, but it's kind of hidden, and if you didn't know to look in that new menu, you would just have to go switch back to Classic, and that may not be apparent to the average end user who's used to seeing that ribbon and looking for it. One thing that they are talking about is that future SharePoint updates will include the option to move content from one library to another, and even one SharePoint site to another. So that's now an option. Within SharePoint, you can move things within a folder. Within OneDrive, you can move things to a folder. But moving from a library to another library, or even a SharePoint site to another site, is a long time coming. That's a long time request. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And as soon as that's available in one of my demo tenants, I will be doing a session on it. And we'll do a compare. Is this going to meet the needs? Do you no longer need a third-party tool? That's something that we'll definitely be looking at. So keep an eye out for that. Now, I'm not going to do a demo on moving content library. I had considered doing a demo, but they don't have the full version of it rolled out yet. It's just the move option, and you can just essentially move it into a new folder within the same library. If you have to move 10 different documents, that's helpful, but if you want to move to a completely other library, you're kind of stuck with the built-in options or purchasing third-party tools. So this is one of the things that we like to address with Evolve 365. So with all of the ongoing changes in Office 365, how do you let your employees know what's coming down the line, what's changed, and how to effectively use all of features in Office 365? So if you like the short tips that I've given in my sessions over the last few weeks, you should maybe want to take a look at Evolve 365, which is our subscription-based help desk as a service for Microsoft Office 365, and it also includes SharePoint, SharePoint 2010, 2013, and SharePoint Online. It's designed to increase end-user adoption and help evolve your organization to be more productive. We have thousands of on-demand self-help videos that people can come in and search. We also have guided skill tracks, so if they want to come in and learn the basics of getting started with a SharePoint, we have that as well. And we also have available add-ons including live phone support with Office 365 specialists, vision and planning sessions, and every package comes with a dedicated Office 365 trusted advisor. So again, this is a subscription-based help desk as a service. We've got a lot of content out available on our trial site. I'm not going to give a demo, but you can see the general layout of the site itself. And we do have a trial site that you can take a look at, and that's at freetrial.o365support.com. Now our trial site does have limited content. We have over 25,000 videos going back to Office 2010, 2013, 2016, Office 365, SharePoint, and even Windows operating systems for 7, 8, and 10. You'll have limited content on the trial site, but it will give you an idea of how the content is structured. Most of our videos are 20, 30 seconds, maybe at the most a few minutes, but it's really designed to let people get in, do some searches, find the information that they need right away, and get back to work. So you can check out our trial site. If you do want to sign up for a free trial, you can always go there. You can also email us at info@o365support.com if you have any other questions. Now, again, I have my tips and tricks series continuing. Next week, I'm going to be talking about Sway. So that's one of the Office 365 apps, but it's also a free app from Microsoft, so you don't need an Office 365 account. We're going to discuss that next week and show you some things that you can do with Sway inside the business world and even outside of it. Ongoing this week is Unity Connect Online. This is a free virtual training conference for SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure. If you register online for the site, you can get access to all of the recordings, and that registration is open for 30 days. So even if you register next week, you'll still get access to the recordings for 30 days. Coming up at the end of the month, Planet Technologies is going to give you the best practices for Windows 10 deployment. So a lot of organizations are looking to upgrade everybody to Windows 10. That may be a good session that you want to sit in on. And of course, our tips and tricks happen every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. You can always find the latest webcast on the Planet site and our YouTube channel. I see a couple of people hanging out. I'm going to be here for any questions in the next minute or so. But again, I want to thank everybody for their time today. I hope this was a little bit helpful. There are lots of built-in tools within SharePoint. We just sometimes need a little guidance to use them. And if you keep an eye on my July sessions, I'm definitely going to be looking at the third-party tools and the newly released SharePoint mobile app to see what updates we have for SharePoint. Again, thanks everybody for your time today. I hope to see you online next week.